This is a great day for me personally, as this 2-year inquiry has been a cloud over my head, a heavy burden on my shoulders. Even though I know I have done nothing wrong, this actually vindicates that, right? So after a 2-year inquiry by the Pennsylvania State Ethics Commission looking into whether or not during my tenure as superintendent I improperly used my authority for personal benefit, has reached a conclusion. Despite the negative, libelous, defamatory commentary from a said reporter at KDKA, which is totally false, they found that there was no findings of intent on my part to deceive the families, my staff, and the taxpayers of Pittsburgh. Throughout this fact-finding review, I have cooperated fully with the Ethics Commission in every aspect by providing requested materials, written, verbal statements, and various correspondence. While there have been many headlines on this disruption, I've been unable to speak on this matter publicly until today by law. This review, however, did provide an opportunity for our district to reevaluate our practices and our reporting protocols. In fact, we're in the process of instituting a rigorous ethics training program for all employees covered by the Ethics Act. And in August 2020, the Board of Education adopted a revised Code of Ethics and Conflict of Interest policy. The purpose of this policy is to set forth ethical guidelines for reference by the board members, employees, volunteers, and persons doing business with the school district. As I've done since my arrival to Pittsburgh, I will continue to push for a transformative district that puts our students' outcomes first, making sure we go from an adult-centered to a student-centered environment to focus on improved student outcomes. With this review behind me, it looks like a fresh start, and I'm welcoming this school year as we start this and this cloud is over. So I'm going to turn it over to my legal counsel, Mr. David Berardinelli, to have his statement and answer questions.
Good morning, everyone. As Dr. Hamlet said, my name is David Berardinelli. I had the privilege of representing Dr. Hamlet in the Ethics Commission inquiry. As Dr. Hamlet just mentioned in his remarks, we are very happy to report that after a 2-year-long inquiry, the findings of that inquiry by the Ethics Commission and a consent order between Dr. Hamlet and the commission are going to be made public today. Once you get a chance, and some of you may already have, to look at the findings, you'll see they're very detailed. This inquiry looked into a variety of aspects of Dr. Hamlet's administration since he first came to Pittsburgh in the early summer of 2016. We are happy to report that no intentional misconduct by Dr. Hamlet was found or admitted to in the consent order. I want to repeat that, and I want to emphasize it. After an inquiry that reviewed nearly every aspect of Dr. Hamlet's administration since 2016, no finding of intentional misconduct or wrongdoing is made in the commission's order. We are very thankful for that. We appreciate the cooperative relationship we've had with the commission throughout this process, even though it was an arduous process for Dr. Hamlet. And we are looking forward to putting this matter behind us and Dr. Hamlet getting back to the business of helping to educate the district's children. The commission's order, if you haven't seen it yet, can really be broken down into 4 primary areas. 1 are record-keeping mistakes related to leave time and expense reimbursement. 2, the payment of honorariums for consulting work while Dr. Hamlet was not on school district time. The flying classroom contract and trip, which I think everyone is probably familiar with by now. And the 4th subject are Dr. Hamlet's yearly statements of financial interest forms. I'm going to briefly address each of those 4 topics. Then, since this is primarily a legal matter and the document is a dense legal document, I'm then glad to field some questions for a short period of time as Dr. Hamlet's counsel. Let's start with that first area, record-keeping mistakes. The commission's order refers to Dr. Hamlet having negligently received travel reimbursements that should have gone directly to the district. And I emphasize that word negligently because it is in that order for a reason. We would not have agreed to any resolution that said Dr. Hamlet affirmatively did something intentionally wrong. What you're going to find is that Dr. Hamlet doesn't complete his own expense reports. And there were times during his 5 years as superintendent where a reimbursement that should have gone directly to the district accidentally went to Dr. Hamlet. When the inquiry brought this to light, Dr. Hamlet had one goal and one goal only in mind: to figure out what he had received in error and make sure the district got paid back. That happened this morning via check he wrote for just under $3,000. And writing that check is consistent with one of the agreements we made in the consent order. Importantly, the processes and procedures that led to those errors being made over time have now been remedied. New processes, new procedures have been put in place to make sure that these incorrect, erroneous expenses don't happen in the future. There were similarly errors regard to keeping track of Dr. Hamlet's personal leave. Like the reimbursements, the order refers to these that haven't been negligently made. Again, that word is in there for a reason, because we were not going to agree to a resolution that said Dr. Hamlet did anything intentionally wrong, because he didn't. Again, to remedy the negligent errors related to his leave, Dr. Hamlet is forfeiting a number of vacation days to make the district whole. And again, to make sure it doesn't happen in the future, there are a series of new processes, checks and balances put in place to make sure his leave is accurately tracked moving forward. That's the first area: negligent receipt of reimbursement payments and leave. The second area is honorariums. And the place to start here, and this is in the findings report, is Dr. Hamlet's contract with the district, his original contract with the district from back in 2016. He didn't draft that contract. If you read it, it's sort of a template document. I imagine the superintendent before him had a similar contract. That contract expressly allowed him, in plain black and white, to receive honorariums for events or consulting work so long as he was on personal leave when he did that. If he was not on leave, then any honorarium he received was supposed to be sent to the Pittsburgh Promise. But if he was on leave, under the plain black and white of his contract, he could accept honorariums. Over time, he did engage in some consulting work, including with an entity that's been reported previously, ERDI, and he received consulting payments, honorariums, on a few occasions. He thought that was fine. His contract said he could do it. So if the contract says he can do it, what's the problem? Well, the problem is this: despite the contract giving him the green light to do that, the ethics regulations don't allow that. So the words that the district put in his contract are at odds with the ethics regulations. And we realize that now. And you're going to see, much like the intentional use of the word negligent in the expense reimbursement part, because his contract permitted this, the receipt of the honorariums is deemed, and the word that the consent order uses is a technical violation, right? Not something intentional that he did, knowingly trying to break the ethics rules, a technical violation. That's a word that we made it into this agreement for the same reason. We were not going to admit to anything intentionally wrong, and he didn't. And as a show of good faith and as part of the consent order, Dr. Hamlet has agreed to pay over $3,250 related to these honorarium payments to the Promise, as if he had not been on leave, even though he was when those payments were received. That's area 2, honorariums that he received that were permitted by his contract with the district. Area 3, the flying classroom. This is not the first time that everyone on this Zoom meeting has heard about the flying classroom. And in our view, this is sort of old news. But what is news from our perspective is that in entering the consent order, Dr. Hamlet did not admit, and in the plain language of the consent order, he denied violating the Ethics Act as to both the flying classroom contract and the trip that has been widely reported on in the media already. We are now glad with that denial that this old news can finally be laid to rest. There are a couple additional points worth mentioning, however. The order does not contain any finding of graft or inappropriate conduct as to the awarding of the flying classroom contract. In fact, it's almost the antithesis of that. Let me tell you what I mean by that. There were proposals submitted by Flying Classroom to the district that would have paid that company over $450,000. In the end, the program the district signed up for was for $78,000. There's also no finding of graft or impropriety as to any other contract entered into by the district under Dr. Hamlet's tenure. None. Period. None. This is an important point because there has been inaccurate, inflammatory reporting, including last evening, claiming that Dr. Hamlet is being fined by the commission, and I quote from that report last evening, for, quote, financial relationships with vendors and the purchase of millions of dollars in questionable educational technology products. That statement is simply wrong, flat wrong. That issue is not addressed in the order in any way, and there's no truth to it. There's nothing like that in the order because nothing like that happened. One last point as to the Flying Classroom. The district incurred one and only one minor expense as to Dr. Hamlet's personally related to the Flying Classroom. It was a $500 flight to Florida, and he's agreed to repay that amount back as part of this resolution. So the district will be made whole as to Anthony Hamlet. That brings us to the last area, statements of financial interest. There were mistakes made on his forms. To rectify those mistakes, Dr. Hamlet is going to submit and has agreed to submit revised forms. But I want to put in perspective, and the report lays it out in detail, the type of mistakes, the information we're talking about. Some are really hyper-technical, okay? So on one of his forms, what's your job is one of the questions. He writes superintendent of schools. Well, the commission thinks he should have wrote superintendent of Pittsburgh Public Schools. So he got dinged for that. The next one will say superintendent of Pittsburgh Public Schools. And as a little bit of background, Dr. Hamlet and his administrative team received, unfortunately, no training on how to fill out these forms, no training on the Ethics Act at all from the district. That is going to be remedied. The commission itself, the Ethics Commission, performs training, and at Dr. Hamlet's direction, we're going to set it up so that they can come to the district and train him and anybody else who has to file these forms on the appropriate way to do it and the wholesome way to do it. So that's one example of the errors. Another one, again, technical, not trying to hide anything that the public doesn't already know, right? So on his form in 2016, he failed to list that he previously worked for his district in Florida, right? Everybody knows he worked for a district in Florida before he came here, but he didn't list that out of a little bit of confusion about what needed to be listed on the form because of a lack of training. Another example, occasionally Dr. Hamlet will attend conferences because the district is a member of certain organizations. Council of Greater City Schools is one of them. Right? When there's a Council of Greater City Schools conference, a foundation related to the council pays for the participants' travel and lodging. Right. So if there's a conference in Philadelphia, a principal drives there or a superintendent drives there or flies there, they don't actually incur that cost. All that travel is made in advance. So no money goes to the district, no money goes to Dr. Hamlet personally. But because his travel and lodging is covered, that needs to be reported on that conflict of interest form, on the statement of financial interest. He didn't realize that. The commission wants him to report it. We're going to report it, and we're going to report it going forward. So again, those are the type of issues we're talking about. And two of the forms were filed late, again, because of a lack of training. And that's really what went wrong here. There's nothing nefarious here, and he doesn't admit to anything nefarious related to these forms. He didn't get the right training. The forms have some errors. They're going to get fixed. We're going to do the training, and the district is going to move on. That's really, it's a long report. It's 147 pages long. The last 2 pages are probably the most important ones. They are the order from the commission. That order summarizes the preceding 145 pages. And that order, in a nutshell, are those 4 areas we just walked through. And no finding and no admission of intentional wrongdoing or misconduct by Dr. Hamlet. And I want to say thank you to my colleagues on the legal side at the commission for working cooperatively with us to bring this matter to an amicable conclusion. I do want to talk a little bit about process with the commission, because I think there's been some belief in the public that the board itself has had this findings report for 30 days, and that's not right. So up until this morning, when the commission made the document public, everything that happened over the last 2 years is confidential by statute. And it's my understanding that if that confidentiality is breached, someone is breaking the law. So the only people that had the findings report legally in the last 30 days since it was initially issued and the order by the commission was issued were the people at the commission, myself, and Dr. Hamlet. The board didn't have it. And to my knowledge, the board hasn't even seen the report yet. It just went up on the commission's website maybe an hour ago, if maybe a little shorter time period than that. So before I take any questions that you guys might have, and I'm sure you have them, I want to reemphasize that Dr. Hamlet's primary objective in working to resolve this matter with the commission was to make sure the district was made whole. That's been accomplished, and he looks forward to moving ahead to getting back to the hard work of helping the students and families that he serves as the superintendent of Pittsburgh Public Schools. Ebony, I don't know, are you going to field the questions, Ebony? And then
Sure,
Yeah.
thank you very much. Yes, thank you
Okay.
very much. As part of our normal process, we're gonna ask that you please raise your hand, and when I call on you, please announce your outlet, your name and your outlet, and then proceed with your question. And I don't see any hands yet.
Use the raise your hand feature that's in Zoom, please.
So Tom Davidson. Tom?
Can you hear me now? Am I unmuted?
you're good, Tom. Thank you.
Just quickly wanted to make sure, wondering if you could expand on, I did hear from Controller Michael Lamb this morning that you might have been aware of the findings of this investigation before Dr. Hamlet's latest contract was approved last year, during this process. And I just wanted to see if you could expand upon the fact that you weren't allowed to communicate that or any of that information to the school board during those negotiations. Is that correct?
Let me try and answer it this way, Tom, because I want to be careful, because what happened between the only thing that is public are the report and the findings, right? The whole process by statute and regulation remains confidential. So I want to sort of steer carefully here. But what you will see when you look at the dates on the document is that the commission held its hearing and issued its order on July 26, 21, 30 days before today.
Mhm.
And before that, and until today, we were prohibited because of the confidentiality rules from disclosing that to anybody, you guys, the board, anybody. Commission is the same way, they could not disclose.
Okay. And the only other question that I have is, you said that that Dr. Hamlet did not complete his, was this staff members that completed the expense reports? Like, how did that work?
His administrative assistants book his travel and do the expense reports.
Okay, that's all I have.
Thank you, Mr. Davidson.
David?
Hi, David Kaplan with WTAE here. I understand your perspective on this as it relates to the order. I guess just at a minimum, I'd like to ask Dr. Hamlet if he regrets some of the carelessness that you all have laid out, some of these issues that have caused this distraction. Would you have handled anything differently? And do you feel people should have confidence in your ability to lead this district, knowing some of the carelessness and issues that appear to have been laid out in this report?
Let me take that on Dr. Hamlet's behalf. If we could all go back and do this all over again, I think a lot of people would do a lot of things differently. And what is sort of a silver lining when there's an inquiry like this is it lets you see if there are gaps in your processes and procedures, right? And if there were gaps, they've been remedied by additional processes and procedures that have been put in place. We're going to do the training with the commission. And on the broader picture, I think Dr. Hamlet's record on actually helping the students, helping the families speaks for itself. And I think people ought to have the utmost confidence in him. And now that this is behind, let's forge ahead and continue to build that confidence in that record.
Respectfully, is there anything Dr. Hamlet can say to my question?
Yeah, right now the question and answer is only going to be directed at the legal findings in the report. So I'll let Ebony and Dr. Hamlet figure out whether there's another appropriate time to field questions like that.
Kara? I saw your hand was physically, I saw you had your hand raised.
Okay, thank you. I haven't had a chance to go line by line, and I didn't know if anything was repetitive. So what is the total amount of reimbursement that Dr. Hamlet is giving to the district, and has that already been paid? I know there was reference to a check made this morning.
Yeah, so actual dollars to the district is, I don't have the number on top of my head, Kara, but it's $2,900 and change. And that has been made. There are some logistics for reasons that I don't understand. That check has to be sent to Harrisburg, which will then turn around and send it back to the school district, but that check has been written. So that as far as reimbursements to the district. Then there is the issue of the honorarium that we've agreed to pay a portion of those over to the promise. It's not money that the district is entitled to, right? So it's going to the promise. There are logistics with that too. It's got to go to Harrisburg. It's got to go back to the district, and then the district has to send it to the promise. But I think the real answer to your question is reimbursement to the district is $2,900 and change. And that's been made.
Lisa, your hand was up and then down. Are you good?
Was that?
I'll be back in a second. Sorry.
Okay.
I think
Andy?
Mr. Sheehan had a question. Go
Yep.
ahead.
Okay, Andy.
Yeah, you joined.
Mr. Sheehan, you broke up a bit.
You're striking it. Can you hear me?
I can hear you now, Andy, yes.
Okay. So you're drawing a distinction between negligence and intentionality.
I'm not drawing it, the commission drew it, the order drew it.
Well, but according to the report, he kept $6,000 in honorarium to this trade group ERDI. He received and kept thousands of dollars in travel expense money reimbursements that he got from that the district paid, that he got and pocketed from the conference hosts. He marked time from time spent out of the state and out of the country on private business as work days, and then bought his vacation time back. I spoke with the director of the Ethics Commission, and he said, in terms of intentionality, he said, one or two of these slips may be justifiable, but this shows a clear pattern of abuse.
Well, Andy, I can only tell you this. I think you're talking about facts, right? And then there are conclusions that the commission, not their lawyer, draw from those facts and put it in an order. Okay? So, let's deal with the expense reimbursement. That is the $2,900 that we just talked about. You can read it as well as I can read it. Negligent receipt of travel expenses. That's the conclusion. That's not intentionality. So I'm not drawing that distinction. Let me finish. I gave you a long speaking question. Let me finish my response, please. I'd ask that courtesy. I gave you a courtesy of asking a 60-second question with multiple parts, and I'll try and answer all the parts. Okay? The same goes with the leave. The order, after their findings, the commission makes an order based on the facts, right? That order says anything related to that was negligent. I'm not drawing that distinction. I'm reading it from the order. We wouldn't have agreed to this if the commission had insisted on a finding of intentionality. So I don't know who you talked to. I can't speak for the commission. I can only tell you what the public document and the order they issued says. I hope that answered your question.
In the court of public opinion, this looks like double dipping, where he is basically.
Well, in the court of public opinion, that's what you say.
Dr. Hamlin, let me answer.
Anyway.
Anthony, Andy, I know that's the thesis.
You need to.
I know that's
respond
the
to
thesis
the
you'd
truth.
like to report on. Let me answer it, Dr. Hamlin, please.
Yeah.
I know that's the thesis you'd like to report on. The order from the commission doesn't support your thesis. You go ahead and report whatever you want. I can't stop you, right? That's why we have a free press. But that's not what the order says, and that's not what the commission found.
Okay, so now we're going to move Sarah Schneider.
Hi, okay, thank you. I am confused about the total amount of fines. You said $2,900, which is one of the fines listed. And in total, it looks like about $8,000. Can you explain the difference or what?
Yeah,
Yeah.
So Sarah, first of all, the word fine doesn't appear in the order at all. But I think Kara's question dealt with reimbursement to the district.
Sure,
Right.
okay.
So the 2,900 was answering her question. That is reimbursement to the district. Then there is the 3,250 related to the honorariums, which by the way is half of the honorariums. So the commission allowed Dr. Hamlet, because it was permitted by his contract, we agreed, we'll give half to the promise, the other half is out of play. So then you add that, and then for each incorrect, and they were incorrect, right? Statement of financial interest form, he pays $250, so that's another $750. And then there is a component of the order that asks him to pay a portion of the costs of the investigation. That's another $1,000. I can tell you that typically is $2,000 or higher. We ask them to have what their normal assessment would be for that. And I think that probably gets you to the 8,000 you're calculating, Sarah, but I could be wrong.
Okay, so total payments of $8,000. So why is the money being sent to the promise? Could you explain that?
Yeah, so it's an effort to strike some consistency with the contract, right? So his contract with the district said, if you're on leave, which he was, you can do this and keep the money. If you're not on leave, any honorarium you get while you're on district time, right, should go to the Pittsburgh Promise as a charitable entity. So since this isn't really money that the district is out, what we discussed with the commission and what gets baked into this order is the concept that let's get that money to the charity that is least discussed in the contract. So that's why it's going to the promise.
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
Nicole?
Good morning.
Good morning. Nicole.
Nicole with KDKA. I just wanted to see if this had never gone to the Ethics Commission, could something like this have continued? Kind of how is this training going to rectify this moving forward and making sure this doesn't happen again? And kind of twofold, is this something that has happened with other districts in terms of just incorrect financial forms?
I can't speak for other districts, and I can't even speak for other administrators. I can only speak for Dr. Hamlet. I mean, I think if he'd have gotten the appropriate training on the forms in the first place, they would have been filled out correctly. If you've ever read the instructions, they're not an element of clarity, but I think if someone walks you through them, you can understand what needs to go on the form. So we're glad it's going to be remedied. We're going to have the training he now clearly understands, and ultimately anybody else at the district that has to fill these forms out is going to understand what they need to do.
Well, that brings us, we started like 2 minutes over and now we're like 2 minutes over. So everybody who had a hand up has been able to ask their questions. Thank you all for being here with us today.
Wait, Ebony, I had a question.
Yeah.
Oh,
Ebony,
sorry, I didn't see your hand up. I'm sorry, Anna. You're go ahead.
These are just two quick ones.
Yeah, let's extend this. I want to make sure that all the reporters.
Yeah, I did. Yes.
I know it's open, but just hold, let them ask their questions. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Dr. Hamlet. So two questions is, one is, okay, hang on. So while the expense forms were filled out by your administrative staff, didn't Dr. Hamlet have to sign those forms? And my other question is a school question, which is, about the 5,000 laptops that haven't been returned? And what, like, I know this is sort of changing the subject, but what's happening with that? That's,
We'll deal with the first one. The second one, I think, is gonna have to wait for a different briefing on a different day. Dr. Hamlet signed the forms, right? He was not careful enough, and I think he would apologize for that in reviewing what his assistant set up. So that's why we take fault for it, because he did sign the forms.
Yeah, so we'll have to have you talk with someone on our team and on the second question.
thanks, Ebony.
And Tylisa, you had a question.
Yeah, I was wondering if you all can possibly just give any more insights. Actually, no, I can't do my video right now. But if you give any more insights into like what changes are happening with these processes, how these new processes and procedures look. And this might be a question for, a later date when we meet, but just wanted to see if there's any more insights you can give.
I'll do my best and give you an example, Tylisa, maybe. So in the
Yeah.
past, for most of the administrative staff, their executive assistants handled their leave, put in their leave. Not anymore. Do it yourself, right? So that if there's an error or mistake, there's only one person that can be found at fault, the person whose leave it is. So I think that's an example. I think they've tried to tighten up in general some of the expense reimbursement forms and policies, but I don't know all the minutia of that. I do know, at least if that's my understanding is correct, that now Dr. Hamlin, for example, is going to sit down at the screen and put in his leave himself, where he didn't do that before.
Thank you.
Sure.
Okay, now I'm going through. I don't see any hands.
Hi, I'm sorry. Controller Michael Lamb is out with a statement saying that there needs to be a change in leadership at Pittsburgh Public Schools. I wanted to get your reaction to that, given what you all have talked about in the last half hour.
I don't think Mr. Lamb is right. I'd have to understand his opinion a little more, but I think the school district is in great hands with Dr. Hamlet and will continue to be in great hands with Dr. Hamlet.
Thank you.
Okay, so that concludes today's meeting. Thank you so much for being here today. Again, if you have any follow-up questions, please reach out to me and we'll do our best to get you a response. Recording. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Ebony. Thank you all. Have a good day.
Bye.